record.
Recording
and
in
CUNY
progress.
TV, that is your clue that we are now in public session. Members of the Board of Trustees, Committee on Fiscal Affairs, please respond present when you hear your name. Chairperson Ferrer.
Here.
Vice Chairperson Mojica. May be delayed. We got a heads up. He may be delayed. Trustee Sunshine. Trustee Berger.
Present.
Trustee Cortez Vasquez. Okay, Trustee Thompson.
Present. And by the way, I know that there's a Senate committee confirmation meeting going on right now, Finance Committee, where a few of the members are in front of that committee for reconfirmation as members of the board. So I know that Trustee Mojica, Trustee Sunshine, and others are in front of that committee, probably as we speak.
Yeah, but most of us don't have to appear. They're doing it now. It's only the new members who have to appear.
Okay.
Please continue.
Okay. So Professor John Verzani.
Present.
Professor Ned Benton.
Present.
Okay, Alexis Fisher. The student rep. It's hard for me to see everybody, but I don't see her. Nicole Agu, also
Present.
the student alternate.
Present.
Great. Trustee Picant.
Present.
Great. And Trustee Burke. I thought I saw you,
Present.
Martin. Terrific. So you have a quorum. The Public Committee on Fiscal Affairs is now called to order, and on March 7th, 2020, Governor Cuomo issued Executive Order 202, declaring a state of emergency in response to the COVID-19 outbreak. On March 13th, 2020, Governor Cuomo issued Executive Order 202.1, which included a suspension of law allowing the attendance of meetings telephonically or other similar service. Article 7 of the Public Officers Law, to the extent necessary to permit any public body to meet and take such actions authorized by the law without permitting in-person access to meetings, and authorizing such meetings to be held remotely by conference call or similar device or service, provided that the public has the ability to view or listen to such proceeding, and that such meetings are recorded and later transcribed. In accordance with the executive order, this board meeting is being held via video conference with a live stream found at the CUNY Board of Trustees website. Closed caption can be seen on the bottom of your screen. A copy of the calendar / agenda is also available online at the CUNY Board of Trustees website. Additional items may be added during the meeting. As a reminder, please mute your audio so we can ensure that everyone can hear. I will now take a roll call attendance for members of the Chancellery and other invited guests. Members of the Chancellery and other invited guests, please respond present when you hear your name. Chancellor Matos Rodriguez.
Present.
General Counsel and Senior Vice Chancellor for Legal Affairs, Derek Davis.
Present.
Executive Vice Chancellor and Chief Operating Officer, Hector Batista.
Present.
Interim University Provost, Daniel Lemons.
Present.
Senior Vice Chancellor, Glenda Grace.
Present.
Senior Vice Chancellor, Matthew Sapienza.
Present.
Vice Chancellor, Brian Cohen.
Present.
President Carol Mason.
Present.
Great. President David Wu. President Wu, are you with us?
He's there. I saw him.
Okay. President Monroe.
Present.
Perfect. Christina Chiappa, Deputy Chief Financial Officer.
Present.
Catherine Abada.
Present.
Vivek Upadhyay, the University Executive Registrar. I thought I saw Vivek. There you
Present.
are. Terrific. I see Lorraine is just joining us. Okay. Mitch Gibson, a Senior Advisor and Deputy Chief of Staff to the Chief Operating Officer.
Present.
Terrific. Gwen Perlman, University Director of Capital Budget.
Present.
Elaine Pimentel, University Director of Financial Aid.
Present.
I see you, Elaine, but you're muted.
Present.
The Chief Procurement Officer.
Present.
Okay. Catherine Cobb, the Vice President of Administration and Finance at Baruch College. Okay, nope. Meryl Kennard, Special Legal Counsel and Labor Designee at BMCC.
Present.
Elena Samuels, an Assistant Vice President for Finance at BMCC. Nope, okay. Jorge, Planning and Facilities at BMCC.
Present.
And Jeanette Antonio, the Purchasing Director at Lehman College.
Present.
Ronald Bergman, Chief Information Officer at Lehman College.
Present.
Hey, Ron. Pamela Mills, Dean at Lehman College.
Present.
Great. And Renee Rotolo, Vice President, Administration and Finance at Lehman College. I saw Renee. She was one of the first ones on, so somewhere. Okay, great. And I noticed that we've been joined by Trustee Mojica and Trustee Cortez Vasquez. Is that true?
That is very true.
Excellent. Welcome, you guys. All right. Any other trustees that I
Well,
might
I
have
know for
missed?
me, I haven't seen Robert, so I don't know if he's on.
I saw him up for a second there.
I'm looking at him. He's there.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, great. It's all you, Freddie.
Well, thank you, Gail. Now it's time to turn to item requiring a vote today, given that all the board members are participating remotely via Zoom and we're unable to see everyone at once. I'll announce the resolutions and ask for members to respond only if you'd like to abstain or oppose an item. Otherwise, your vote will be recorded as a yes. If you're voting or no or abstaining, please state your name and vote. Additionally, if you wish to second an item or have any questions, please state your name first for the record, and let's try to avoid speaking over one another. Now, for the items following requiring approval. Action item 1A is the approval of the minutes from the May 3rd, 2021 meeting. I'll move approval of policy item 1A. Do I have a second?
Berger, second.
Are there any additions or comments on the minutes? Hearing none, we'll now vote. The minutes are approved. Policy calendar item 1B1A is a resolution to authorize a contract with Kone Incorporated for escalator maintenance services at Baruch College. Baruch College requires full escalator maintenance services for all 10 escalators located at 55 Lexington Avenue. Maintenance services include all inspections, adjustments, tests, parts replacement, and repairs necessary to keep the escalators continually used at their initial performance ability. Same speed, safety, and efficiency as an initially specified by the equipment manufacturer or most recent upgrade specifications. University seeking approval from the board to approve a contract with Kone Incorporated in the amount of $782,250 over a 5-year period. In consultation with the folks at our CFO's office, I'm going to move that we table this. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. We'll now vote. Only respond again if you'd like to abstain or oppose. The motion to table is unanimously approved. Thank you. Policy item 1B2A is a resolution to authorize a contract with Core Facility Services, LLC, to provide building maintenance services at Borough of Manhattan Community College. The college requires preventive maintenance and operating services for its leased space at 70 Murray Street and is not permitted to use in-house staff for these activities. The university is seeking approval from the Board of Trustees to authorize a contract of Core Facility Services LLC in the amount of $1,804,785 over a period of 2 years. President Anthony Monroe and his team are available to provide further background if you so desire. I'll move approval of policy item 1B2A. May I have a second?
Berger, second.
Is there any question or discussion on this?
Question, Mr. Chair.
Trustee Berger?
Is the prohibition on using in-house service a lease provision? Why are we prohibited from using our own people?
I think we've had one of these before at this very college, but I'll ask President Monroe to respond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Trustee Berger, to your question, I believe it is a condition of the lease that we have on 70 Murray.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else? Well, thank you for your response, President Monroe. Will now vote. Please only respond if you would like to abstain or oppose. Hearing nothing, the motion to approve item 1B2A is unanimously accepted. Thank you. Policy item 1B2B is a resolution to transfer Mackenzie Scott Gift Funds on behalf of BMCC to the Borough of Manhattan Community College Foundation, Incorporated. On December 15, 2020, Mackenzie Scott selected BMCC as one of the recipients of her groundbreaking philanthropic initiative, the 2020 Fund, and awarded the college with a gift of $30 million. Ms. Scott placed no restrictions on the gift, but requested that the funds be used to benefit BMCC and its students, subject to the priorities, guidance, and approval of the BMCC president. The Board of Trustees accepted the gift on December 30th, 2020. BMCC is seeking permission to immediately transfer $15 million of that gift to Borough Manhattan Community College Foundation. The funds transferred to the foundation will be separately maintained in a restricted account named the BMCC President's Fund for Excellence and Innovation. In honor of fulfilling Ms. Scott's wishes, the college will ensure that the fund is used only for specific enumerated projects approved by the BMCC President. President Monroe will provide further background on this if you so desire. In the meantime, I'll move approval of item 1B2B. May I have a second?
Berger, second.
Thank you. The motion is made and seconded. Are there any questions for President Monroe? Trustee Berger?
Yes. Who controls the expenditures of the $15 million that hasn't been transferred to the foundation?
Thank you, Trustee Berger, for your question. This resolution has two components to it. One of which is that $15 million, subject to the board's approval, will be transferred to the BMCC Foundation, which is responsible for honoring the wishes of the college vis-a-vis the President's Fund for Innovation and Excellence. The resolution also calls for the other $15 million to be transferred to the CUNY investment pool and will be governed by the investment and strategies by the CUNY investment pool. The President's Fund for Excellence and Innovation will make the determination through the college's review and assessment process in terms of which projects will be funded year over year.
And that includes determinations from both the foundation and the investment pool?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else on this item?
I'd raise a question if I may.
Professor Berzani?
The investment pool has a restriction of 4% spending per year. Are there any such restrictions on the foundation funds, or is it subject solely to the board's discretion?
Do you mean, Professor Berzani, the board of the foundation?
Yes, exactly.
President Monroe?
Yes, thank you for the question. There is an investment strategy that speaks to the amount that can be spent in any given year, and we will be compliant with those provisions as laid out by the investment strategy.
Is there any other questions? Well, thank you, President Monroe. We'll now vote. Please only respond if you'd like to abstain or oppose. Item 1B2B is approved unanimously. Thank you very much, President Monroe and your team.
Thank you so
Policy
much.
item. Good seeing you again, by the way. Policy item 1B3A is a resolution to authorize the purchase of audiovisual equipment and a contract with Mason Technologies Incorporated for services related to upgrading Lehman College classrooms to networked digital HyFlex technology. The COVID-19 public health emergency has demonstrated the need to equip classrooms, lecture halls, and meeting rooms with upgraded technology to transform them into a wireless, collaborative, multimodal teaching, learning, and meeting spaces to support in-person and remote classes and meetings. Lehman College is seeking approval from the Board of Trustees to utilize an existing CDW Government LLC contract to purchase audiovisual equipment for 172 general classrooms and 4 large lecture halls in an amount not to exceed $5,692,771. The college is also seeking approval to enter into a contract with Mason Technologies in the amount of $1,998,989 over a 1-year period to provide one-time labor costs for programming services and associated software not included in the university's current contract with CDW Government LLC, but is necessary for installing the network system. This new equipment will provide flexible education and learning options for Lehman's faculty, students, and those within the community with disabilities, medical, or related needs for accommodation, and fully participating in classes and meetings. Lehman College will utilize a portion of their Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act, CRISA funds, for this critical initiative. Interim University Provost Daniel Lemons and his team from Lehman are available to provide further background and answer questions if they are required. I'll now move policy item 1B3A. May I have a second?
Berger, second.
Are there any questions or any clarification that anyone needs on this item? I see Trustee Berger.
Yes. The resolution says it was determined that Mason Technologies has the requisite requirements. How is it determined to choose them? There apparently was not competitive bidding. How is it determined to use this particular source?
So if I could ask Vice President Ron Bergman and also Vice President Rotolo to respond, because they'll be able to give you the details on that selection.
If it's okay, I'm going to start. So Mason Technologies is an MWBE firm that works often with CDW on doing installations. And they actually, as part of CDW's contract, have access to the Extron equipment. They're a certified user. A certified retailer and installer. And we did receive proposals from several other firms, and we determined that Mason Technologies was the most qualified and responsive to that. Now I'll defer to Ron to speak more about their expertise.
While you're there, maybe you want to go into a little more depth. I believe Trustee Berger's question was aimed at the procurement process rather than the optics. But if I'm wrong, Trustee Berger, please correct me.
No, the statement was that there were proposals received. Was there an RFP? How were proposals solicited? What was the process? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So yes, we developed a specification, a scope of work that was issued to 2 different vendors and a third vendor on the actual installation services. Our director of procurement is on the line. I'm going to ask her to add to that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Renee. So the scope of work was developed by VP Bergman, and it was released to CDW as well as one vendor on the OGS contract. Mason is a subcontractor to CDW, but they also hold the OGS contract for these supplies as well.
So my understanding is that there was no public dispersal of this list of specifications. It just went to a few specific vendors who had been pre-selected.
Correct.
Thank you, baby. Thank you, Lou. I apologize. I had to run out for a second.
I've got a question.
Yes.
I think there's a larger issue here, and that is that I don't know how the specification was written to what it is that the university or the college intends to be the modality, which is called HyFlex. We've defined 3 different modalities for instruction. The university has. There's classroom, there's fully online, and there's hybrid. And this is a highly regulated topic. When you say you're going to do a class in a certain way, you have to describe which nights you're going to be in the room and which nights you're not going to be in the room. And there's got to be a lot of prior notice to students. And my concern is that I think we're getting the cart before the horse. This might be a good idea, but one of the issues is that the place in which the class gets taught under this modality is the classroom. And we're, like most educational institutions, short on classroom space. And we have other modalities like totally online or like hybrid, in which we can, like hybrid, we could use the classroom for 1/3 of the nights, and then we could be online for 2/3 of the nights. And we're at another part of this meeting, we're investing in software, that the classroom and event management software, to help us more efficiently use space, so we don't have space dead on every other week when we're not teaching the class in the classroom. It seems like this modality is going to conflict with our intentions about using our classroom space more efficiently. I might be wrong. I often am, but it would be useful to have us study this first before we go out and spend many millions of dollars in order to buy the equipment, and then determine that, yeah, we can't use it efficiently in our classrooms.
Thank you for, I'd be happy to respond to that.
Please.
Thank you, Professor Benton. You raised a lot of, I think, important points. Maybe another perspective that we could look at this is from the point of flexibility. Our plan is to equip Lehman's classrooms, and hopefully eventually all of them, to provide maximum flexibility, because that is what will, in the end, is going to serve our students best. So as you say, there are modalities that are sanctioned modalities right now. We know about hybrid online and in person, but we also, as we upgrade our classrooms, we want to have the flexibility to do what we can envision now and in the future, so that we have a flexibility for students, instructors have flexibility, and students have flexibility in choosing the way taking a class works best for them. HyFlex, in a way you could think of it, I'll ask Vice President Bergman to maybe add to this in a minute, but HyFlex in a way you can think of as a superset of a way to set up a classroom. While we're in the process of equipping a classroom really in a way that across the United States, many classrooms are already equipped. While we're doing that, we really want to do that in a way that isn't just for the present, but that really gets us into the post-pandemic future. And this is a way to do that. It doesn't prescribe anything in terms of the way a course is delivered. It simply provides a maximum flexibility that we can envision right now for the way that we can deliver courses, so we can take care of students. And frankly, I think that this is a matter of taking care of students, but it's also a matter of remaining competitive in an increasingly competitive higher education marketplace, where students are going to be looking for the modalities that work best for them. We really want to be positioned to do that in the most effective way that we can. And Vice President Bergman, I don't know if you want to respond more specifically to the technology aspects of what Professor Benton was asking about.
Sure. Well, thank you, Dr. Lemons, and thank you for the question. I just want to add that Lehman has many older classrooms that have not been upgraded. Some of those classrooms have no computer. Many classrooms have technologies that is 10 years old and at end of life. For example, we still use a standard called VGA. That's a video standard that you don't have in your home anymore. It was introduced in the 80s and phased out in 2015 in favor of HDMI, for example. And so we've historically upgraded a small number of classrooms each year, but we haven't kept pace with other colleges in providing a contemporary classroom environment. So the whole idea behind this is to augment the teaching capabilities and flexibility that faculty members will have in the classroom and expand their toolbox, if you will. The idea here is to have an upgrade that improves existing capabilities, such as the projector and screen, ensure that each classroom has a computer, enhance networked classrooms and have better Wi-Fi access for collaboration, and to add a camera and a microphone. And that will be the kind of equipment that's typically found in a contemporary classroom in any college or university around the country. These are time-tested technologies. They exist less at Lehman due to budgetary restrictions, as I've mentioned. And the camera and the microphone, for example, can be used by the instructor to record a lecture for later posting on Blackboard, to add a guest lecturer to join the class remotely, or include students that may not be able to join in person. It could be somebody who is disabled. It could be somebody who's not vaccinated. It could be a variety of people, and it will help us to expand our educational mission and increase access. And so that's the basic nature of it. These are technologies that are in place in most places, but we haven't had the benefit of really upgrading classrooms in some time at Lehman.
Is that responsive, Professor Benton, to your question?
I would say it is mostly responsive. I certainly think that having advanced equipment in the classroom is a good thing. And most of what it is that you're doing here, I would support. The specific question is the element of the project that is installing HyFlex as a particular technology. And I mean, I think that we are going to come to see that we are going to need to be investing in technologies that are not installed in and situated in the classroom. We need to be freed from the classroom. And this I think is the issue, but I don't want to say that I'm opposed to having good quality technology in the classrooms for most of the things we would be doing. Thank you. I've had a chance to speak my mind, and we'll let things go as they go.
Yes, you have. Is there anyone else with a question?
I'd raise a question if I may.
Professor Barzani.
As faculty representative on this committee, I've been asked by Lehman faculty to relay 3 concerns. One is there's a concern expressed about the cost. This is roughly $40,000 per classroom. There's some sense that that's out of line. The Fiscal Affairs Committee in its wisdom will judge that. The second one was the expectation of some sort of increased workload due to high flex learning. That's not really a concern of this committee, but I relay that for your ears to hear. And the third one I have lots of sympathy for, and it's the microphone and cameras that are installed in the classroom. There is a concern expressed by Lehman faculty that those will be used for some sort of eavesdropping. And I'd like to hear if there's either policy in place regarding that, or if these cameras and microphones through the Mason technology are centralized, and that's going to be a source of contention between faculty and administration in an ongoing manner.
Dr. Lemons, would you care to respond to questions 1 and 3?
So actually, maybe we can go in reverse order, and I would like Vice President Bergman again to respond to that very specific question about, I think it's surveillance is the general term we're talking about.
So thank you for the question. I can assure you that this is to provide maximum flexibility for the instructional needs of the faculty member. And the faculty member will have complete control. There will be no centralized control over the cameras and microphones. They will be able to turn on and off that equipment directly on their own at the classroom level. The only things that will be monitored centrally are things around the technology relating to, for example, is the screen broken and does it go up or down? Is the bulb going to be at end of life and therefore not work during the course of a class session? So we'll get some alerts about those sorts of things, but not as it relates to the pedagogical mission of the instructor. That is up to them and will be fully in their control. And we will document that to make sure that it's absolutely in writing and available, and we'll work certainly with the interested faculty to make sure that they're aware of that. They will also be able to test the equipment. We'll show them completely the front end and back end of the technology. And we have been engaged in multiple discussions at many different levels. The president has had discussions at forums on a regular basis. We've met with the FP&B. It's been discussed at many different meetings with deans and faculty, et cetera.
And you'll develop a policy in consultation with faculty?
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Okay, anything else? We had question
So we had
1.
Sorry. Yeah, so question 1 was about the cost per classroom. I think that was the main question. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I'm not sure the basis for the question, except when you put it per room, it comes out to be quite expensive. But I know at the College of Staten Island, when we're doing it on the cheap, the implementation is not optimal. So I don't know what the right number is, but I wouldn't mind hearing about the development of the cost structure.
Sure. And I'm going to defer for the details on that. But I think what you just said is, in general, what I would say is we really want to do this in a way that is robust and that we feel will function well. I know as a faculty member, and I've spent many years as a faculty member and probably always been one of those kind of bleeding edge faculty members with technology and paying a heavy price, I suppose, to do it. But I know how important it is to have the right equipment and to have it be really reliable because we really we want to encourage faculty to use the digital resources that most have really developed quite extensively over the last 15 or 16 months and will be valuable in a variety of ways in classrooms. We want to make sure that they have the technology that they need so that that will actually happen, so that all of that effort will really live long beyond this pandemic. And I think Vice President Bergman, you probably are the best to respond to the cost and where the costing is on each classroom.
Yeah, I think I'll ask Vice President Rotolo to assist me, but the cost is not inexpensive for the implementation, the purchase of equipment, the services, the testing, and the programming of the Extron classroom technology, which is what integrates all the technology together so that you can have the screen work together with the projector, with the computer, et cetera. And then there's going to be some training and quality assurance that needs to happen to make sure, as Dr. Lemon said, that what we have is a situation which enables fast startup, a uniform approach so that a faculty member in one classroom in one building is able to as easily start their class and manage it as in another building. And so we were looking for a uniform solution building on existing resources that we have and technologies, but that bring them to a much more modern state. And in terms of the cost, I can't really speak to the overall cost in the sense that what we're dealing with is a significant set of technologies that if you take them and this will last and benefit faculty and students at Lehman for 10 plus years, in my view, and will allow us to maintain a contemporary environment. The other piece of it is that I'll just add that my understanding is that the cost of services includes prevailing wage. And so that will tend to increase the cost because of the nature of prevailing wage by itself. But this will create an environment, and when you think about the lack of investment and the need for infrastructure that supports teaching and learning at Lehman for 15,000 plus students currently, with the idea that we are the sole senior college in the Bronx with the borough that has the most needs for educational attainment, and that we want to do the best for our community, that we want to invest in technologies that really affirm the importance of having skilled, talented, and capable graduating class for many years to come.
Mr. Chairman, if I can, I just
Yes.
want to add, thank you. I just want to add regarding the cost that because this is related to enhancing the distance learning modality, that it's our expectation that the majority, if not all of these costs are going to be eligible to be reimbursed from federal stimulus funds.
Mr.
Okay.
Chairman, can I offer one comment, please?
Go right ahead.
I know the conversation is more on the total cost side and maybe the merit of the whole system. I just wanted to circle back on Trustee Berger question around the procurement process. And I want to underline that this is going to be done under the EO 202, which exempts from a formal solicitation. That doesn't mean that we don't have to conduct any sort of price validation, which in this case was done. And the pricing was even further negotiated, the one-time fees and the converted cost to a fixed cost per room. So all those analyses were done and were negotiated in preparation. But again, a formal solicitation wasn't done because it wasn't technically required. Again, doesn't
Well,
mean
while we're talking about EO 202 and other related issues, let me ask you a question. Does this solution require exclusive use of Wi-Fi or a hardwired application? Presumably, you know something about the procurement, no?
Yes. So if it is a technical question about the configuration, I think probably the CIO would be in better position to answer that. What I can say is, again, from a strictly procurement perspective, the hardware, it's been procured from a CUNY-wide contract, which it has pretty advantageous pricing, and the labor cost is mostly prevailing wages. And then again, there's another recommendation, if not a stipulation from some of the OEM vendors, in this case, Extron, that the same vendor that provides the hardware is the one that has to install this same hardware. So that limits the options to go with different suppliers for certain part of the hardware. In this case, the digital signal processors.
Okay, so is there anyone who can answer on your team who can answer the question about
Trustee Ferrari, I'd be happy to, yes. So the investment is on the wireless access in classrooms and to enhance collaboration with the idea that faculty and students will be able to use their devices and collaborate in much more meaningful ways. And currently, given our current Wi-Fi infrastructure, it doesn't sustain the growth that we see in the need for Wi-Fi. So yes, so in order to enable a Wi-Fi device, you have to have cabling to that device. So yes, that's the connection to the infrastructure, but we will be expanding where it's appropriate. Because this is, at the end of the day, the goal is to be cost effective, but we do expect to expand Wi-Fi capabilities in the classrooms and lecture halls where they don't currently exist to satisfaction.
Okay, but you're going to make that connection and you're going to improve wired access under this contract?
No, the added Wi-Fi capability will be part of this contract. In terms of adding access points, we will be doing our own work separately to bring the wires to that, to the classroom and improving sort of the central infrastructure.
And you'll be doing that in-house?
We will be doing some of that in-house and some of that will be contracted because our in-house staff is limited and we will need the assistance of a vendor to do work on the scale that we're talking about with approximately 172 classrooms.
Okay. Is there anyone else on this? Trustee Berger.
Yeah, let me just state that I continue to be concerned about the procurement process, not only with this contract. The default position is we should be competitively bidding contracts to get the best possible contract at the best possible price. In rare circumstances, we should be pre-selecting eligible vendors, as apparently was done in this case. We shouldn't be looking for excuses to do that. And let me state that in the future, if a contract is not competitively bid, and unless there is a significant reason not to have competitively bid it, I will vote against that contract no matter how good it looks. We've stated this before. I'm not sure that it's had any impact. I'm stating it again affirmatively. I will vote against non-competitively bid contracts unless I'm convinced that there was a reason to do it that way.
That's a point well taken. Thank you very much, Trustee Berger. Is there anyone else? Okay. It's been moved and seconded. Are we ready for a vote? Again, if you're voting against or abstaining, this is the way to do it. Identify yourself and let us know what you're doing. Hearing none, this item is approved. Item 1B3B is an authorizes, I beg your pardon, authorizes program fees for the Health Careers Preparation Post-Baccalaureate Certificate Program, Health Bridge at Lehman College. Lehman received approval for the Health Bridge Pre-Health Professions Post-Baccalaureate Certificate Program from the University Board of Trustees on June 29, 2020, and the State Education Department on November 20, 2020. The certificate has two phases, an optional foundational phase and an in-depth phase. The Health Bridge certificate will provide a cost-effective, highly supportive post-baccalaureate program in 7 pre-professional areas that enable students to take a few courses in the foundational phase to determine their interest in the program. If interested, enrollment in the in-depth stage. The in-depth stage requires significant resources to support the success of the matriculated post-baccalaureate students, which includes intensive advising, preparation, and standardized admission tests, personal statement workshops, internships, clinical advising, and placement. Placement too, that's good. And institutional committee recommendation letters. Upon enrollment in the in-depth phase, the college will charge a program fee of $2,500. However, students will not be charged a program fee for the foundational stage. The certificate is awarded following the successful completion of the in-depth phase. The university is seeking approval from the board to adopt a schedule of program fees for students enrolled in the in-depth phase of the post-baccalaureate program. Of $2,500, a one-time fee collected during the first semester of enrolling in the in-depth phase for resident and non-resident, full-time and part-time students. The fees will be used exclusively to support the extracurricular needs of the Health Bridge student, including but not limited to advising, clinical internship support, test prep support, and application support. Dr. Lemons and his team are available to answer questions and provide further background if required. I'll move item 1B3B. May I have a second?
Berger, second.
Are there any questions for Dr. Lemons on this program?
I'd raise a question if I may.
Professor Bezzani.
Yes, I appreciate the nuance in how the fee is being applied only in the second stage of the program. I appreciate the fact that these programs are expensive and that the cost comes in less than the similar but narrower in scope program at City College, which I think runs $10,000 for the program fees. But I have a hard time supporting a proposition that asks students to pay $2,500 when the financial position of Lehman is such that there's 1.8 million coming in each year from the Scott donation. There is a $14 million Kutra balance, and there's roughly $50 million of federal funds that are going to be extremely hard for Lehman to spend, except for big cash outlays such as what we just discussed. I just feel like this should be pushed off for 2 years while the cost of the program as it runs can be computed, and then the students can get the benefit of these federal funds that Lehman has so that they're not taking on this excessive cost.
Professor Bezzani, if this were a baccalaureate program, I'd be inclined to agree, but it is not. So does Dr. Lemons wish to respond? No one?
Dr. Lemons, unmute yourself.
He's muted.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Trustee Farrar. Yes, so first on the stimulus funds, I don't think those funds would be allowed to be used for that purpose. It's a continuing program. The cost would continue well beyond the probably 2 fiscal years, those funds would be available. So I don't believe that would be an option. The Mackenzie Scott gift at 4%, the endowment part of that is going to provide a little under $1 million a year to the college for a variety of uses. Some of those are yet to be determined. In fact, most of them probably are yet to be determined. But as you can imagine, there are many, many programs that could benefit from those funds. And at this point, I think it would not be a great idea to commit to support this particular program with those funds. I think you're very right in pointing out that the relative cost is quite low compared to within CUNY or certainly outside of CUNY, where these programs can be many times more expensive. This program has these costs, which will be ongoing. And therefore, and this addresses, I think, what you suggested about future funds, which we never commit future funds to ongoing expenses, whether they be personnel or other, because we know that those are essentially one-time funds. And what we really need to do is to put this program on a very strong, financially sustaining footing, because it is so important to the students who will be in it. This program already has high demand, we know, and students really feel that the benefit is there for what they are getting. And so it's a very, really, in any comparable way, it's a really modest fee, not insignificant, obviously, for many students, but modest. And the program, which is really innovative. And I have to say that Professor Scott Calvin, who's developed this program, has done a really amazing job putting this together in a way that is particularly shaped for our students. And it's one that is really optimal for students who are underrepresented in the health professions, represent a large part of the Lehman College student body, and students who are post-bac who would take part in it. So I think my main response is we need to have this on a sustainable financial footing. That's the only way that we can envision programs that we think have very long-term possibilities in being put together and offered.
Thank you. Is there anyone with another question? Okay, hearing none, 1B3B has been moved and seconded. We will now vote. Please only respond if you'd like to abstain or oppose. 1B3B is approved. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Lemons and Lehman team. Item 1B4A is a resolution to authorize a contract with Campus Logic Incorporated to provide a comprehensive student financial success platform at the central office. Every year, the US DOE selects a percentage of students who apply for free application for financial student aid, FAFSA, in that award cycle to provide documentation that verifies information submitted on that application. The current verification process at the university is manual, and thus the university is seeking a robust FAFSA verification tool to administer and manage the verification process in a largely automated fashion. The university is seeking approval from the board to enter into a contract with Campus Logic, Inc. for a period of 3 years in an amount not to exceed $3,279,725. Mr. Vivek Apati from the University Executive Registrar is available to provide further background on this item if you so desire. I'll move item 1B4A. May I have a second?
Berger, second.
Thank you. Now, is there any discussion on this item? Anybody on this item?
I just
Now-
make one point.
Oh, yes, Professor Berzani.
It's about the calculation on savings and the expectation that there'll be personnel lost. I mean, in conversations with the registrar's office on my campus, there's a disbelief in this particular type of statement and the fact that there's not full-time personnel dedicated to these particular tasks. They're dedicated to a wide variety of tasks, and the expectation that there'll be such significant savings is sort of unrealistic. However, I'm in full support of this particular proposal.
I hardly know what to do with that statement, but thank you for your statement. Is there anyone else? Hearing none, we're ready to vote. Please only respond again if you'd like to abstain or oppose. Item 1B4A is unanimously approved. Thank you. 1B4B is a resolution to authorize the renewal of University Enterprise License for IBM SPSS statistical software. IBM's SPSS software is a statistical analysis software for social scientists that have been a mainstay of statistics-based academic research, widely used at the university since being licensed as an enterprise education software in offering in 2009. The university's Office of Academic Affairs recently surveyed its campuses and found strong support for continued access to SPSS software. Students and faculty at the university use SPSS to display data easily, formulate hypotheses, further study, perform procedures to explain relationships between variables, build clusters, identify patterns, and make predictions. In short, this makes statistics sit up, go bow wow, roll over, and do whatever you want. The existing contract will expire on July 31, 2021. The university is seeking approval from the university's Board of Trustees to enter into a new agreement with IBM in the amount of $1,660,674,000 for 3 years. The proposed contract will include student and faculty home use of SPSS software at no extra charge. University interim provost Dr. Lemons will be available to provide further background on this if you desire. In the meantime, I'll move approval of item 1B4B. May I have a second?
Berger, second.
Are there any questions or any discussions on this item? Okay, then we'll now vote. Please only respond if you'd like to abstain or oppose. This item is unanimously approved. Item 1B4C is a resolution to approve an agreement between the City University of New York Central Office and the CUNY Institute for State and Local Governance for 2022 to 2025, next level efficiencies for reinvestment and innovation projects. In March 2018, the university entered into an agreement with CUNY Institute for State and Local Government, ISLG, in an amount not to exceed $5.6 million for 4 years to assist the university in meeting goals of increasing student retention and graduation rates, in part by reallocating funding from its administrative functions, while at the same time creating efficiencies in operations and improved processes to serve students better. Additionally, performing certain services would result in greater efficiencies and cost savings. As part of the services to be performed on the original ISLG agreement, the university launched the Efficiencies for Reinvestment and Innovation Initiative, ERI, formerly known as the Administrative Excellence Initiative. In fiscal year 2018, the efficiencies, the ERI builds on work conducted for the university for the past 4 years in the following areas: human resources, procurement, information technology, enrollment management, transfer and audit, and adult and continuing education. The university seeks to continue its agreement with ISLG to develop and implement a strategic plan under ERI across multiple areas to institute best practices, achieve savings, and improve efficiency. It will assist with prioritizing initiatives that foster the efficient and effective delivery of systems, services, and technologies integral to the university's function. The university is seeking approval from the board to enter into a 4-year agreement beginning on July 1, 2021 with the ISLG to continue its work under the ERI to perform additional work and other services at a total cost not to exceed $7.1 million. Executive Vice Chancellor and Chief Operating Officer Hector Batista is available to provide further background and answer questions if you desire. In the meantime, I'll move approval of item 1B3C. May I have a second?
Berger, second.
Are there any questions or any discussion on this item? Okay.
I'd raise a point if I could, sorry.
Professor Bazzani, don't be sorry.
There's a couple proposed initiatives that I know are going to lead to issues with the faculty, so I'll just point them out now. One is, while many are certainly great ideas, these are ones I can foresee being a problem. Rethink community colleges to best serve their students. There's a number of community college faculty who are very concerned that declining enrollments are going to lead to radical changes on campuses. I believe that having a outside contractor, despite their ties to CUNY, without faculty input might be a mistake there. There's going to be a lot of anxiety over that particular one. Evaluate modes of course delivery to bring transformative innovation to CUNY. I would think pre-COVID that might have been something people would believe in, but post-COVID with a significant decline in enrollment due to, in my mind, the delivery method of online instruction solely is one that may give us pause in terms of pushing for a push towards course delivery that's not in person. And the last one, I don't understand what it is. It's evaluate faculty optimization post-COVID-19. I don't know how the word optimization fits in there, but when I think of optimization, I think of some sort of gaming that is going to either to generate higher revenues. I don't even know what that means. I mean, does that mean we're going to hire fewer faculty so we pay them less so the revenues overall are greater? Or we're going to hire more faculty so there's more students coming because they love how well these faculty do? I don't know what that means, but I think that's another area that might cause concern.
Would our COO?
Can I comment on that, Trustee Ferrer?
Chancellor, of course.
Obviously, this is the work of fellow colleagues from the university who have been supporting our efforts to become more efficient and more nimble. Anything here that addresses academic matters will be worked under the university provost and in total consultation with the governance and the faculty. So anything here that addresses items that deal with faculty matters will all be done in consultation. So there's no attempt here to do anything else but do what good universities do, is question things, kick the tires, and try to do an overall better job.
Thank you, Chancellor. And I presume everybody understands that whatever ISLG recommends has to come back to the board anyway. But okay. Anybody else? Oh, right, now I presume we're ready to vote. Again, please respond only if you'd like to abstain or oppose. Item 1B3C, is approved. Thank you. Item 1B4D is a resolution to authorize the 2022 university operating and capital budget allocations. The FY 2022 New York State enacted budget and New York City executive budgets have appropriated $3.8 billion in operating funds to senior colleges, community colleges, system administration, shared services operations, and academic programs. And $321.2 million in recurring state capital funding from the prior year, and $146.5 million in new state capital appropriations, $2.81 billion in state capital reappropriations, and $172.8 million in city fiscal years 2021 and 2022 capital budgets. The Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act, CRRSA, and the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, provides the colleges with $360.5 million and $398.7 million respectively to cover costs and lost revenue resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic. The university is seeking approval from the board to adopt the appropriated operating budget allocations by campus and program set forth in the attached documents for fiscal year 2022, beginning July 1, 2021, in the total amount of $3.8 billion, and to adopt the capital budget allocations pursuant to Exhibit A for projects authorized by the City University Construction Fund to address critical maintenance, infrastructure, programmatic initiatives in support of the university's mission. The university is also requesting the Board of Trustees to adopt the FY 2022 CRRSA and ARPA allocation plan set forth in the attached CRRSA and ARPA plan document. Additionally, the university is requesting that the chancellor or his designee be approved to make necessary adjustments to the 2022 CRRSA and ARPA allocation plan up to 5% of the allocations provided to ensure that the students, faculty, and staff are receiving the benefit of these resources in the most timely and efficient manner, and to report such changes back to the Board of Trustees, Committee on Fiscal Affairs as part of the quarterly reporting of the budget condition. And the university is also requesting that the chancellor or designee is hereby authorized to modify up to 5% of the allocations of state and city appropriations for the university within the parameters of the state and city budget legislation. Any modifications to these above these levels will require board approval. I'll now call on Senior Vice Chancellor and CFO Matt Sapienza to provide more information on the budget proposal. Matt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, everyone. There's a few documents that were part of your materials related to the budget. One is the detailed budget and allocation document that was put together, and I want to thank our University Budget Director, Kathy Abada, and Gwen Perlman, our Director of the Capital Budget, and their teams for their work in putting that document together. But what I'd like to go through this evening is a PowerPoint presentation that summarizes the materials in that document, and we'll make reference to materials in that document as we go along, and happy to take any questions or concerns after the presentation. So I'm going to share my screen here. Many thanks to Gail and her team as always. Let's go into full screen mode. Okay. Okay, so we're going to start with the operating budget. And the total operating budget for fiscal 22 is $3.8 billion. The The senior college allocations are based on the fiscal 22 state enacted budget, was enacted back in early April. And the community college allocations are based on the fiscal 22 city executive budget. The mayor has proposed the executive budget. The mayor and the city council are still negotiating a final adopted budget for the city's fiscal year 22. So what we're presenting tonight is based on the city's executive budget. And as the chairman said when introducing this item, this allocation includes the allocation of federal stimulus funds from the rounds 2 and 3, the CRISA funds and the American Rescue Plan, we're referring to as ARPA. The first round of stimulus, the CARES funds, we are projecting are going to be fully spent at the end of the current fiscal year 21, so that there won't be any remaining for fiscal 22. So this chart on the operating budget shows a year-to-year change from fiscal 21 to 22 for all of our major revenue sources, state, city, tuition. I want to point out on tuition that the numbers are flat because this budget does not recommend a tuition increase for either the senior colleges or the community colleges next year. It's the second year in a row for the senior colleges that we are not recommending a tuition increase, and for the community colleges, the 5th year in a row, so that tuition rates will remain the same for next year. Scholarships and waivers are going down because of the increase that was included in the state budget for TAP, of tuition assistance plan, the $500 increase to the maximum award. And so we're very grateful about that. And that's part of the reason that state support is going up by $61 million. So overall, university-wide, it's $36.3 million, which is about a 1% increase over the current year. This pie chart shows, again, the sources of funds that we just looked at in a different view. State support is the largest, 53%. City support is 14%. Student tuition, that gray slice on the left-hand side, that's the amount of money the students are paying out of pocket. So that makes up 20% of our operating budget. Scholarships and waivers 5%, and then federal funding 8%. And on the next slide are the uses of the funds. So senior colleges are 39%, community colleges are 14%. So 53% going to the college-based budgets. On the left-hand side, that darker blue slice, fringe benefits, is almost $1.1 billion. It's about 29% of our budget for health insurance, Social Security, welfare fund payments, pension payments to our retirees. That makes up almost 30% of the budget. Energy, building rentals, about 3% each. System administration and shared services combined, the central office is also about 3%. Academic programs 5%, and then other about 4%. So for the senior colleges, the state enacted budget, as we saw, is about $2.7 billion. And for 22, the reduction that we had in the 21 budget is being restored. So in the current year's budget, the senior colleges had a reduction of $26.2 million. And in the state enacted budget, those funds are being restored for 22. So that's part of the year-to-year add for the senior colleges. Fringe benefit increases were not funded in the budget for fiscal 22. And so we are making an adjustment for the senior colleges to account for those additional costs. The enacted budget increased, as I mentioned earlier, the maximum TAP award by $500, which was very welcome. And what we are estimating that's going to generate about $23 million in additional revenue at the colleges. And then we're also pleased about the additional funding, $5.6 million for SEEK, which is about a 20% increase to the SEEK budget, $150,000 for CUNY Leads, which is a terrific program for students with disabilities, and new funding of $1 million for student mental health services, which again, we're very pleased to see in the final state enacted budget. On the community college side, again, we're basing this mainly on the city's executive budget, and the city's executive budget for the community colleges and system office and shared services is about $1.1 billion. The executive budget does include funding for mandatory cost increases for the community colleges, but it also includes a $67.3 million reduction for next year In the current year's budget, the city has reduced the community college budgets by 46.2. So this would be a $21.1 million increase over the fiscal 21 reduction. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, the mayor and the council are negotiating a final adopted budget for the city for fiscal 22. And we're hopeful to get some relief on that $67.3 million reduction target for next year. The state budget increased base aid per FTE funding for the community colleges, which we're really pleased about, by $50 per student, and also imposed a cap on enrollment-related base aid funding decreases, which again was very helpful. So the state is capping enrollment losses at 98% of the prior year funding, which is going to be very beneficial to our community colleges who are feeling enrollment losses and have been for the last several years, especially related to the pandemic. So overall, we're projecting that the state budget will increase by $3.6 million over the current year for the community colleges. And then federal stimulus allocations. So as we mentioned, the CRRSA and the ARPA funding we are including in this initial allocation. Of course, the funds are one time, and so they cannot be used for recurring personnel service costs without colleges identifying an ongoing resource to support those costs. A portion of the CRRSA funds, which was the second round of stimulus funding, will be used by the colleges to close out fiscal 21, and we'll go through that in just a minute. Federal funds going to be used to support, for student support and retention for revenue losses and eligible pandemic-related expenses. And stimulus funds will be used for investment in faculty professional development, student health services, and online program development, which again, I'll go through in just a minute. I do want to point out though, as we get into this discussion about stimulus funds, that the third quarter financial report, which we presented a few meetings back to this committee for fiscal 21, show that structural deficits existed at most of our community colleges and at several senior colleges, which were mainly caused by enrollment losses, budget reductions, pandemic-related costs. And so while we're very, very grateful and appreciative for these federal stimulus funds, again, I just stress that they're one time, and we need many of them to cover these losses and to cover the costs related with returning to more in-person activities. And once the federal stimulus funds are gone, and we're projecting that we're going to have until June of 23 to spend it. Once those funds are spent, they're gone, and they won't be part of our ongoing base budget. And I also want to point out that the hiring freeze that was enacted by the chancellor back in April of 2020 has helped many of our colleges manage their financial position just from the start of fiscal year 21. So the last 12 months, we have had a reduction of 590 full-time positions, which we're valuing at $71 million. So I'm going to take a pause from the presentation here for a quick minute, because what I'd like to do is go to the CRRSA and ARPA plan. And, oh, sorry about that. And I want to just walk through the chart that we have on the CRRSA and ARPA plan so that we can fully explain the categories that are included in there. So I'm going to share my screen again. Okay, I'll increase it a little bit. So the total CRRSA allocations were for institution allocations for $337 million. And because so many of our colleges are designated as minority serving institutions, we received additional funding for that too from the CRRSA stimulus funds, which was $23.7 million, so that second column. So total CRRSA funds are $360 million. And I want to point out that these are the institutional funds. The CRRSA student emergency grants have been given out. Over 95% of that has already gone out into the hands of students. There's only a few $million left of the $118 million that we gave out for CRRSA. That was on top of the $118 million that we gave out for CARE student emergency grants. And for the American Rescue Plan, the ARPA, we're also going to have student emergency grants But that's not in here. Those funds are specifically for student emergency grants. They cannot be used for any other purpose. And so that's not part of this allocation. So CRRSA, we have 360 million. From the American Rescue Plan institutional aid, we have 399 million, which is that fourth column. So in total, there's $759 million. Now we're going to the next set of rows, which are the commitments. So for fiscal year 21, we are projecting, and this was in our third quarter report that we issued a few months back, that about $75 million of the CRRSA funds are going to be needed to close out fiscal 21 for commitments related to fiscal 21, whether it's lost revenue, eligible expenses related to the pandemic. That's about 75 million. That's already has a commitment in the current year. The next set of columns are commitments for the next fiscal year, fiscal 22. Student support and retention, $125 million. Reopening costs, $20 million. That can cover a whole host of costs related to reopening, whether it's testing of COVID, testing of air quality, cost of PPEs and buying equipment that's needed for reopening, $20 million. Revenue losses related to projected budget cuts from the city and from mainly enrollment losses, we're projecting to be $136 million. We are continuing the mental health, proposing to continue the mental health allocation that was included as part of the CARES Act allocation for our campuses, which is $5 million. We are proposing to allocate $8 million for online program development and $4 million for faculty professional development to help with the move to more online services and more online modality. So the total of all of those leaves $385 million remaining from that original $759 million. And what we are going to propose, if approved by the committee, is when we allocate these funds to the colleges, we will ask the colleges as part of their financial plan submission to inform us how they are proposing to use their allocation of the remaining funds over the next two fiscal years, fiscal year 22 and fiscal year 23. And then based on those proposals, we will then review, and if they're approved, we'll allocate the funds to the colleges. If not, then we'll work with the colleges to have a plan that's a more appropriate use of those funds. So that's the breakout of the CRRSA and ARPA allocations. So I'm gonna, before we get to the capital budget, I'm gonna stop there and see if there are any questions on the operating side or particularly on the CRRSA or ARPA allocations.
Chairperson and Matt, I have a question. I have two questions, two-part question.
Sure.
Yes, trustee.
Thank you so much. So can I, first of all, thank you for this, Matt. It really, seeing that we've been talking always about budget reductions and budget losses for the last 3 years that I've been on the board, it's good to see us having some revenue. Which brings me to my two-part question, which is, when I look at the reopening cost and I look at and also revenues to make up for revenue loss, my question, and I look at the mental health services, my question is twofold. Does this mean that we eliminate the student mental health fee, the additional fee that we were going to ask? And what is the impact on tuition increases, if any, for the next 2 years? So can you address that?
Sure. Thanks for the good questions, trustee. Yes, for the mental health services, because we have these stimulus funds and because of the state allocation of $1 million for mental health services, we are not recommending the fee for mental health services that was included as part of our fiscal 21 budget request. So that's not part of this recommended budget for next year. And the same on tuition. The fact that, again, we have these federal stimulus funds, which are going to be incredibly helpful to us. And we know that a lot of our students and their families are struggling right now as a result of the pandemic. The recommendation for this budget is that tuition remain flat for next year.
For the next 2 years?
2 years in a row for the senior colleges and 5 years in a row for the community colleges. Yes.
Great, that's great news. So thank you for that. And I'm sure that our student advocates and our student committee will be happy to hear that. Very happy to hear that.
Let me interpose myself here, just for the sake of clarity. Trustee Cortez Vasquez asked for
Yes,
the next
sir.
2 years, and I believe the answer is no, just for the next year. Is that the case, Matt?
Yes, I'm sorry for my misunderstanding. Yes, our recommendation is for no tuition increase for fiscal 22. We're not making any decision yet on tuition for fiscal 23 until we see what our fiscal situation is like. So yes, the recommendation is for just 1 year.
All right, so that means I'm only half happy. Oh, no, that was a tongue twister. I'm only half happy, but nonetheless, but given the revenue projection for fiscal 23, it seems that it may be likely. So I'll take that. All right, thank you.
Sounds good.
Thank you for the clarification, Chair.
Is there anything else?
Trustee Piquant wanted to say a few words.
Trustee Piquant, always.
Thank you, Matt, for your wonderful report. I myself, student trustee here, am very excited that, students are not going to be facing a hike. And, I think it's to the work that we did despite the pandemic, us organizing and advocating with our elected officials in the New York City community. I think it shows that it is possible. And I think it's going to create more access and opportunity for our students. And I'm looking forward to seeing the route that CUNY is going. I've been in student advocacy for all my 3 years of CUNY. So these are very wonderful things we're seeing. So I'm very excited about that.
Thank you for your work.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Trustee Berger.
A few things. This may take a few minutes. I'm sorry. I think a couple of years ago when we adopted a budget, we proposed adding 400 faculty members a year. Because of the hiring freeze, we've lost 600, nearly 600 over the pandemic. So one, is the hiring freeze continuing? And two, if not, what plans are there to hire additional full-time faculty, either to make up for the loss that we've already suffered or for new positions that we had anticipated adding in prior budgets?
Matt?
Yeah, thank you, Trustee Berger. So on faculty, I think that will be local decisions made by each campus, depending on their fiscal situation, but also a major factor here is going to be enrollment. And what are the projected enrollments look like for fall and spring? I know our community colleges were down over 14% this past year. And so we're hoping that there'll be some better numbers there for this upcoming academic year. So again, those faculty decisions will be made locally on the campuses, again, depending on their fiscal and their enrollment situations.
Well, I think the board has expressed a policy desire to strengthen the full-time faculty, and I hope that will be taken into account. But if I can make a longer statement, when we adopt a budget, Mr. Chairman, what we're really adopting is an expense budget. We don't have any control over the income side. And it's a thing that I don't think we discuss enough. And I think that our funding sources are not serving us well. And let me just explain what I mean. On the state funding, on the good side, they increased TAP by $500. That's going to give us $23 million. They're providing $5.6 million for SEEK, $1 million for mental health, which is wonderful, although we need more. And then additional funding for Lehman and CUNY and Medgar Evers of $1 million. And they've increased the FTE rates for the community colleges of $3.6 million. That gives us a real additional $34 million. Now, although the chart says they're giving us $61 million, that's because they're restoring $1.5 million to to the Labor and Urban Studies School. And last year, we adopted a budget, or the state adopted a budget, and then withheld 20% of it. And when they did the restoration, they restored a lot of other people, they still withheld 5% from us. So we were short 26.5 million. They're restoring that 26.5 million. I don't see that as an additional 26.5 million. It's getting us back to where we were, and we're still at the 26.5 million that we lost last year that was withheld for us. In addition to that, well, on the other side of that, here are the things the state hasn't done. Most importantly, they're not funding the mandatory increases for things like collective bargaining, fringe benefits, rent, electricity, and stuff like that. That costs us about $130 million, as I understand it. That means we have to find $130 million from our instructional budget and other parts of our budget to make that up. And the tuition freeze, which I've advocated for years, is fine, but the state did nothing to restore the funds we lose for that, which means we're at another $33 million that we might have had. So instead of getting $61 million more, we're out more than $130 million on state funding that we have to make up from other parts of the budget. The city budget isn't finalized yet, but we don't do any better there. The city has funded mandatory increases, collective bargaining, and fringes. They've done that traditionally, and that's terrific. They're giving us $2.6 million for Medgar Evers for the Allied Health School. They're giving us almost $5 million for police reform and gun violence. And they're restoring, they were going to cut, but they're restoring $1.9 million for the ACE program, which is the ASAP equivalent that we have at John Jay. On the other side, though, we have a $67.3 million efficiency requirement, $21 million more than last year. We have to make that up somewheres. They're also reducing funding by over $5 million for things like the John Jay Apple Corps, CUNY Tuition Corps, remediation, food insecurity, and childcare. And we can't let those programs last. We have to make that up somewhere else. So we end up being down well over $50 million on city funding in terms of what we have to spend on our programs for our students. And we have to be a lot more aggressive with our funders, because even though they say, oh, they're holding us even, or we're doing fine, or whatever, and there's a new deal for CUNY and whatever, when you look at the bottom line, we're getting hundreds of millions of dollars less for our instructional needs than we've had in the past. And that's not sustainable.
Is there a response to Trustee Berger's comment?
Yeah, Trustee Berger, no, listen, you know, the city budget, as you said, pointed out, it's being negotiated right now, the adopted budget, and there's a lot of needs that we are all strongly lobbying for to get relief on. That $67 million reduction, as you mentioned, and some of the other really important things, and I'm glad you brought them up, like child care centers and food insecurity and remediation, are all things that we're asking the city council's help and helping to restore. The Vallone Merit Scholarships is another item that we're asking the council to restore. So yeah, I agree. We all need to continue to advocate for additional funding for our operating and capital budgets, and go back to what Trustee Picant just said a couple of minutes ago. And, you know, we appreciate the advocacy of everyone in the university, especially the students, for their strong advocacy during the budget process of both the state and city.
I think I'm just saying that we need a stronger, more coordinated, not only from the bottom, but from the top advocacy at both the city and the state level, because we're getting hurt year after year, and we can't deliver the quality education that we think we're promising to New York City.
Trustee Berger's comments are always well made, and we don't get everything we ask for, and everything we need. But the simple fact is we're getting things that will allow this university to move forward. And of course, Chancellor, if you wish to, you're not only our chief executive officer, but our chief lobbyist. Do you wish to add anything to this?
We are out there every day asking for additional resources for the university, and welcome all of us in the board, in the faculty, in the students who will join us in those efforts.
Okay, is there anything else or anyone else?
I'd raise a point if I may.
Professor Bazzani.
First off, I'd like to thank Trustee Berger not only for his statements today, but for his consistent making of such statements, such as when we approved the budget request. He was the lone voice arguing for asking for a more aggressive approach there. I'd also like to thank Vice Chancellor Sapienza for asking the colleges to include their federal stimulus funds in the budgeting process on the campuses, because they also ask for faculty input at that stage. I think it's really important that the faculty are invested and empowered to at least express their areas of concern and aspiration for those monies. I'd like to get back to the slide that says position CUNY for the future. There were 2 points that I'd like to make, and they kind of echo Trustee Berger's, and clearly not as well. First one is, by my accounting, there are 3 senior colleges that will have a base budget allocation that is significantly less than their personnel costs. Those would be John Jay, York, and the College of Staten Island. And that is assuming enrollments reach fiscal year 20, not the fiscal year 21 downside. These campuses are in a complete structural deficit. There is no way that if decisions are made locally that there'll be a restoration of faculty on those campuses. And I have heard from Brooklyn College colleagues, a concern was expressed to the board about the decimation of their faculty staffing. I believe they've lost 44 faculty in the last 18 months. It's a significant erosion. Brooklyn may be able to actually begin hiring, but at the 3 campuses I just listed, there's no way that can happen. And at my home campus, we've had a significant erosion in faculty strength that won't be restored until we have a $7 million structural deficit sort of set right. And I don't believe that can happen. There's my windmill that I tilt at consistently. I don't believe that can happen without a reshifting of funds throughout the university. The rollover budgeting that gets in play this year and last year and the year before systematically leaves some campuses on the short end. And when you have slightly declining enrollments, it only amplifies the issues. So I would hope that at some point we can make a broader look at how the funds get distributed based on needs, less so than historic practice.
That too is a very good point, Professor Bazzani. Anyone from the Chancellery wish to comment?
Ned Benton.
No, I'm asking for someone from the Chancellery who can comment on that.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'll take that one, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Yeah, no, Professor Bazzani, thank you for the comment. On your first point about the federal stimulus funds, yes, part of the financial plan is always consultation with elected student and faculty leaders. So we're glad that will be a component of this year's financial plan. And yeah, as we pointed out, that several of our colleges have structural deficits, and I pointed out when we presented the third quarter report that the federal stimulus funds are greatly appreciated and have given us a lot of things and given our students a lot of supports. But one thing that they've also given us is the gift of time, and that it's given us the funding for 2 years in order for us to work with our colleges who have structural deficits to make sure that those plans are corrected, and we work with them to make sure that the structural deficits are eased. So we'll be working with our colleges on that. In terms of the allocation, we were planning prior to the pandemic to put together a working group to look at the allocation methodology and as you said, the historical based budgets. And obviously we paused that as a result of the pandemic, but now that we're coming out of that, that's something that we're going to start looking at again, and we will have representation throughout the colleges, throughout the university on that group. So more to come on that.
Okay. Is there anyone else?
Yes, please. Professor Benton.
Professor Benton.
Two quick items. Matt, with respect to the student grants, the ARPA student grants, with the earlier funds, we allocated 98% directly to the students and 2%, the money went directly to the students, but the amounts were determined to some extent at the campus level, where the campuses face-to-face knew of particular students who are having unusual problems. I wonder if a campus, and I know of none that is, but if a campus wanted to ask that they be allowed to do 3% or 4% based upon their local knowledge of their students and the situations that it might evolve during the coming year. Is that something that the university would consider? Is there something sacrosanct about the idea of 2%?
No, for CARES, as you pointed out, Professor Ben, we did 2% discretionary, 98% was generated via formula, and 2% was campus discretionary. For the CRISA student allocations, we increased that 2% to 5%. And again, thanks to the chancellor's good wisdom, we increased it to 5% with the hope that the federal government would change their requirements regarding DACA and undocumented and international students, that they would be eligible because they were not eligible under CARES. And we're very grateful that the new administration agreed that they should be eligible. And so that extra 3% that we had was used, those were the funds that we used to then give out funds to those students. So yes, we're open to considering whether to make that discretionary pot, keep it at 5% or somewhere higher for ARPA, and something that we're looking at now. And that the American Rescue Plan funds student emergency grants. A good portion of them will go out in advance of the fall semester later in August.
Thank you. And then one other quick suggestion, and I'm not sure whether it should come here or with the capital budget or whatever, but it seems to me that based upon our experience in the pandemic, that we and society and we're coming to have new ways of using our buildings, using our space. And the new ideas not only are how we use classroom and how we do instruction, but it also is going to affect how we assign offices, how we conduct meetings, and how we organize space at the campuses. And I wonder if some small amount of the stimulus funds might be used by the university for a review of the university's space management and planning guidelines with an eye towards, this whole idea of rethinking how we do things, with an eye towards rethinking our use of space, our criteria for space planning, the methods by which we decide how much space a campus needs, and so forth. I think this would be a moment where we could introduce some new ideas that could be very helpful to us going forward.
The chair?
Chancellor, please.
Just thank you for that suggestion, Professor Benton. And actually it is, and I'll have CEO Batista correct me if I'm wrong, but that's one of the things that you just voted on that by allowing us to continue consulting with ISLG. It is one of the items in that we want to use their expertise to help us think along those lines. So very much in line. I don't know if Hector wants to add anything, but.
No, I mean, I think you're right on point, the Chancellor, but I think the only thing that I would add is that we already started some of that work at the central office, sort of how we look at our leasing space. And we're doing this by looking at sort of granted funded positions and how, so they come into to our space and how they utilize in that particular grant their time, so we could better allocate and be able to reduce the amount of space that we're renting. So we're really trying to consolidate, and that work is going to be really taken a step further. We're very excited about new vice chancellor that's coming on board with Mohammed Atala on board and the ISLG. We're going to be able to look at this in a much different way and be able to come back and report to this committee on the work that we've done. That you should, just to know, on the central office of the space that we were renting, we had 18% that wasn't really being used appropriately. We have now reduced that to 3%, thus saving the university a substantial amount of money and going down. And the idea is to really begin to become, to your point, become more efficient, because we're going to have some sort of a flexible work schedule. And because of that, it is not necessary for folks to have designated spaces, and we'll be able to look at how we can create an environment where people can share some of that space. So more to come there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
While we're on that subject, I want to clarify the record. In the colloquy on ISLG and optimization efforts, Professor Berzani used the term faculty optimization. It is facility optimization. Just want to state that for the record so everybody's clear.
Ah, great.
Facility.
That's more clear.
That's an optimal answer.
And Mr. Chairman, it's a good segue, if it's okay with you and the rest of the committee, if we could go on to the capital budget?
Not yet.
Okay.
Because I have another item on the operating budget.
Sure.
And I discussed this with you offline, so I'll bring it to the committee's attention. If you may want to put that slide up, actually.
Sure,
the
will
operating
do.
budget with all the columns, and the last column says other.
Mhm.
Other FY 22-23 eligible uses. And the bottom line row is over $385 million. Now, I think that requires some explication if we're going to approve this budget. What are the other uses entail? What is the procedure for it? Are these taken separately, so they'll be within the 5% or 2%, whichever one obtains? How does this work? What's it spent for? Because others are very squishy kind of description.
Yeah, no, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So these funds are available to the college and to the colleges, and they are under the guidelines that the U.S. Department of Ed has set for federal stimulus funds. So it could be used for lost enrollment. It could be used for eligible expenditures. It could be used for additional student emergency grants. Could be used for some of the categories that we have listed here, whether it's mental health or online program development. But what we're asking each college, and what we will be asking each college as part of their financial plan process this year, is to give us a plan for how they are proposing to use these funds over the next 2 fiscal years, fiscal year 22 and fiscal year 23. And based on those submissions and based on their overall financial plans, we'll be reviewing them and making a determination about whether we're going to go forward in those plans. So we won't be allocating any of these funds in that last column to the colleges until those plans are approved.
But
And
you're
the
asking the committee to approve allocation of these funds, right?
Yeah, and as we said in the resolution, we're going to come back to the committee and report back on how the funds are being used, and certainly on that, the funds in that column will also be reported on, of course. And one of the things I just want to point out about that last column is that it is our expectation that colleges are going to be prudent and plan for the use of a good chunk of those funds, again, depending on each college's fiscal and enrollment situations, but planning on using a good chunk of those funds in fiscal 23. We want to make sure that we're being smart and strategic about this, and that we're using those funds to help us over the next 2 fiscal years, which under the U.S. Department of Ed guidelines, we should have that time frame to spend down those funds.
I think I understand what you just said, but let me see if I can. Over a 2-year time period, you're allocating these funds in the other uses column, and you broadly specified some of the uses, not exclusive uses for it. And you would like to, in this column, have the committee approve essentially a 2-year budget for those unspecified, as yet unspecified uses. Is that right?
Well, these are amounts that are set by, the first few columns here, the CRISA institutional, the MSI, CRISA, the ARP institutional, those are amounts set by the U.S. Department of Ed. So we can't change those amongst colleges. Those are the totals that have been allocated to colleges. What we're proposing here is that the amounts that are not needed for fiscal 21, that are available for fiscal 22 and 23, that there are half a dozen categories that we are mandating the colleges to use the funds for those purposes: student support and retention, reopening, revenue loss, mental health, online program development, and professional development. Those 6 categories, and we're proposing specific amounts for each campus for those categories. The remainder, we're saying to the colleges, these are the uses of these. We are asking you to propose back to us as part of your financial plan how you're going to use that. It could be to supplement some of these 6 categories that we have here. It could be for other things that are all within the USDOE guidelines. But we know that our campuses have different needs. They all have different fiscal and enrollment situations, different composition of their students. And so we're asking the colleges for their input on those amounts that will require approval from the university.
And after this, oh, I'm sorry. Did I interrupt you, Matt?
No, I'm sorry.
And after this budget will have been approved, presumably, what else do the trustees do with an item like this? Just get reports on them?
Yeah, we can come back once the financial plans are submitted to the university, and once we've had a chance to review and approve them. And again, as Professor Verzani pointed out, all these plans will be done in consultation with elected student faculty leaders. We'll come back to this committee and report back on those plans and what each college is planning on using these funds for in both fiscal 22 and then the amounts that'll be planned for fiscal 23.
So you're not proposing to come back for approval on anything in these 2 years for $385.845 million. Do I hear that right?
Well, the fiscal 23 amounts, whatever colleges are planning to use in fiscal 23 will be part of the fiscal 23 budget when we get to that point, a year from now. So the fiscal 23 will be part of that year's budget that we will bring to the committee, presumably next June.
And how much is that?
We don't know yet. That's, again, will be part of what the colleges will propose. I think there'll be some colleges who are in stronger fiscal situations that will plan to use a good chunk of it in fiscal 23. There are other colleges who, due to their fiscal and particularly enrollment situations, that might have to use the majority of that last column in fiscal 22. So I think it'll depend on each college's fiscal situation and what they propose.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
just a brief statement, and this is following up on a separate conversation that had been had with regard to these funds. And to go back and at least make some of that or bring some of that to light, I'm not comfortable necessarily with that. And I think I had expressed a major concern, some of the disparities in those numbers, and the simple fact that I believe that there needs to be additional conversation with administration, with the board, and looking at some of the rules. And I understand a lot of this is formula driven. I'm not fully comfortable with that. And I think I expressed that at a different conversation, so that, what type of flexibility, given some of the disparities in the numbers there, and particularly some of our colleges that are going through major challenges these days. I think that I expressed at least a desire that we explore, along with the federal government, and in some instances, slightly different ways to be able to look at how those funds are. And I'm not looking to shortchange any colleges, but at the same point, the numbers in there and the differences are very dramatic. So I would say that, and I would strongly suggest that be a conversation to be continued. And before those funds are dispersed, that does come back for further discussion with the board, Matt. So I mean, I'd mentioned that before. It's a lot of money. And I realize a lot of this is driven by formula and driven by enrollment by the federal government. We need to have additional conversations on that. As I said, I expressed that, I guess, at our a different conversation we had. So I would just like, again, to re-emphasize that point. I'm not comfortable with that money just being driven, at least until we can check other things and speak to other representatives on a federal level that drive these dollars, exactly what occurs. So I'd like to just kind of put that on the record, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, Chairman, and both chairmen, because it's and this situation is so fluid that we don't know what can emerge. So I do think it should come back. Thank you.
So we would, delighted to do that, precisely because there's a lot of variables, right? We didn't want to create some rigid categories there that they would handcuff our efforts. There are things that we cannot predict right now. For example, the final negotiations of the city budget can have an impact on, what funding might be needed. We hope that money is restored and we don't have to use that money for restoring cuts, enrollments, right? So there's a number of things here that are uncertain. And so we would be happy to sort of bring that back. We had the conversation about trying to go back at the Chair Thompson's suggestion, conversation with the federal government about any flexibility about this. Obviously, we cannot anticipate how successful or not we would be in those conversations. So that's why that category there was created. But understand the amount and happy to sort of bring it back in whatever way the committee desires for additional consultation or approval.
Well, Chancellor, I appreciate that offer. Was anyone else trying to say something right now?
I just said thank you to the Chancellor. Thank you.
When are the college financial plans due?
So once if the budget allocation is approved, we will send allocations out to the colleges. That'll be draft because they'll be pending full board approval. The full board is meeting on June 28th. And so we'll give the colleges some time to to review their allocations and to start putting their plans together. So let's say probably sometime in July, we would ask for the financial plans to be submitted back to the university for review.
I don't want to beat a dead horse. And I appreciate the chancellor's guarantee of further conversation and action around this. But I trust everyone listening to this conversation sort of understands that as fiduciaries, we are required to ask a lot more questions than other, and then accept a murky answer. I know you're doing the best you can, but frankly, that's a problem for me. So I share Chairman Thompson's reserve about this. And I would urge you, the Chancellor, to come back with specific recommendations about how we deal with these specific items. So there's nothing left unsaid and undone about money that that should be deployed and allocated, but we should know the fate of, and we should know all the details of.
Mr. Chair, it's Ned Benton.
I'm sorry?
Ned Benton, I wanted to make a brief observation.
Sure, why not?
The amount of funds that have been allocated to the campuses by the federal appropriations, by the State Department, by the Federal Department of Education, are based upon a very explicit formula that takes into consideration the characteristics, risk profiles, attendance patterns, a whole lot of things that that determined why Baruch got the amount it got and Medgar Evers got the amount it got, and so forth. And these amounts, I mean, I think there is a factor in that some campuses, the amount of their amount that they're going to get to spend on something new will be different because of the amount they're going to have to allocate to cover their deficit all that has happened because of all the enrollment problems and COVID situations and so forth. But I think it would be constructive to go ahead and ask the campuses to come up with their plans and then look at the plans.
I am sorry to interrupt you. That's not what we're discussing here.
Okay.
We're discussing something else. And what that column represents and how it will be dealt with. So I want to keep it germane. Anyone else?
Okay, can I make one point?
Professor Bazzani, why not?
And hopefully it's germane. If you look at the chart, you'll see that some campuses, I'll use Kingsborough as an example, will not have sufficient funds to cover their anticipated revenue loss if it continues on from fiscal year 22 to fiscal year 23. That's probably the case for nearly every community college there. So in some sense, that money is predetermined. It's going to cover enrollment loss, and it's going to mask the fact that enrollment nationwide has declined at community colleges. If you take other campuses, there is upwards of $40 or $30 million to spend, and it's not going to be covered by enrollment loss. And I feel the board should have a oversight on that. I think you hit exactly right on that point, that that's a lot of money for campuses to spend at their discretion. I think there needs to be a little more fiduciary oversight.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. I just want to point out to Professor Bazzani's point about, yes, community college enrollment is certainly a factor there, but the $67 million proposed cut from the city is also a very big factor there, and why we are strongly advocating for relief there in the city's final adopted budget. Because if there's relief, the community colleges will have more of their federal stimulus money to spend on investment and not covering revenue losses.
Okay, is there anyone else? Then I'll move approval of item 1B3D. May I have a second? May I have a second?
Second, Barzani.
Barzani seconds. Thank you. Now I'll before I'll ask for a vote, that's subject, my moving this is subject to the reservations that I have put on the record, that Chairman Thompson has put on the record with respect to how these, how this particular column and all the rows that that affect it are going to be treated not only in this budget, but in upcoming budgets. And appreciating, again, the Chancellor's guarantee that we will revisit this with the board. Is there anyone else? Trustee Berger, do I see your hand up?
Yes. Can we amend this to delete the $385 million from what we're approving and leave that as not yet approved? And if so, I would so move such an amendment.
There's a motion. Is there a second? Is there a second? I'm afraid it fails for want of a second. However, the point is very well taken. Trustee Berger, I'm looking forward to the follow-up conversations on this because they are going to be, they're not immaterial to what we're dealing with in this university.
And I would say that before any of those dollars are spent or even move forward, that it is something that needs to come back to both this committee and to the board for follow-up. And I think that there's a lot of work that needs to be done, not waiting for a year, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done over the upcoming months pertaining to that pot of dollars.
Indeed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item 1B3D has been moved and seconded. If there's no further discussion, we'll vote. Please only respond if you'd like to abstain or oppose. One B3D is approved. And now we're on to information items.
No, capital budget. Capital.
Mr. Chairman, we didn't do the capital budget.
Yeah, I was waiting for somebody to talk about that. Capital budget's not being presented yet.
That's right. It is. We're ready for that. If you can do capital, we're ready to present capital
now.
Yes.
Just approve the budget.
They give it as information. It's part of the, would you like us to go through that, Mr. Chairman?
Why not? Please proceed.
Okay. So on capital, the state enacted budget adds a total of $467 million, 394 for the community colleges, 35.5 for the, 394 for the senior colleges, 35.5 for the community colleges. The community colleges are matching funds. They're funded 50% state, 50% city. So this is a match of funds the city's already put up. So it really totals 71 million for the community colleges. Administrative costs for the running the capital program is funded at 37 million. And then reappropriations of $2.8 billion for both the senior colleges and the community colleges was included in the state enacted budget. The city budget, again, as we did on the operating side, we're assuming the funds that are in the city executive budget, which is $172.8 million. Again, we're hoping for a better outcome in the city adopted budget, but we're using that number for now.
Matt, did we lose your audio?
Sorry about that. For the senior colleges, just more description on the state capital funds that was on the previous sheet. 284.2 million for capital infrastructure funding, which is funding that we've received for the last several years. I'm very grateful for. 47 million for senior college specific, 56 for university wide, and then 181 million That'll be used for university-wide needs. Two new things that were in the state budget for this year for the senior colleges that we were really pleased about was $100 million for expansions and improvements. That's new money for senior college expansion and improvements, and then $10 million for an offshore wind power and green energy training. And then on the community colleges, we have the list here on this chart of the state capital funds that were included in the enacted budget from April. And you can see some of the larger projects here at pretty much all of our community colleges are covered here with some type of allocation in the state budget. On the city budget, again, right now in the executive budget condition, $172.8 million. The breakout there from mayoral, borough presidents, and city council is there. And again, we're hoping for a better outcome in the city's final adopted budget. And that's it on capital.
Are there any questions or comments? What is the name of this policy item on the agenda? Because I did not have it on my copy.
Freddie, it was all part of the budget reso.
Oh,
So
I'm
you
sorry.
already approved the budget reso, and Matt presented the capital budget after the fact. It was all part of your budget materials.
I know, I saw it before, but it wasn't on.
Yep,
it wasn't
it's
on
all,
the agenda
it's all
reso.
embedded in the same reso.
Okay, well, that's as it should be. Is there anything else?
So now you have your information item,
We have
right?
information items. And Matt, do you wish to present any new information to the committee?
No, Mr. Chairman, the fiscal matters information report lists waivers and fees for 3 colleges, Lehman, New York City Tech, and York. And the information is there, but nothing that I'd like to specifically point out at this time.
If there's no comment or questions on it, I'll move to adjourn the meeting. May I have a second?
Second.
The meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
We're
everyone.
jumping right on to the next one. Thanks, everybody.